There is a particular quality to the air just after dawn breaks, when the world is suspended between the cool stillness of night and the gentle awakening of day. It is neither warm nor cold, but something in between, a temperature that asks nothing of the skin, that simply exists as a whisper of presence. In a small house nestled on a quiet street lined with oak trees, this air moves through an open kitchen window, carrying with it the faint green scent of dew on grass, the subtle perfume of night-blooming jasmine that has not yet closed its petals, and underneath it all the promise of mint leaves growing in a terracotta pot on the windowsill. The breeze is so gentle it barely moves the lace curtains, only causing them to sway in the smallest of rhythms, casting delicate shadows that dance across the worn wooden floor like fingers of light playing an ancient, silent song. The kitchen itself is a study in comfortable simplicity, a space that has witnessed countless mornings, countless quiet preparations of the day's first meal. The table stands in the center, its surface smooth from years of use, the grain of the wood visible in golden and amber swirls that catch the early light. Two chairs are positioned at angles that suggest frequent use, their seats slightly worn in the middle where bodies have settled time and time again. On the counter, a ceramic teapot waits, its glaze the color of rain clouds, alongside two mugs that do not quite match but belong together nonetheless, one the shade of cream, the other a soft dove gray. The refrigerator hums its low, steady song in the corner, a sound so familiar it becomes part of the silence rather than an interruption of it. Above, the ceiling beams are exposed, dark wood that speaks of age and stability, and from one of them hangs a bundle of dried herbs, lavender and rosemary tied together with twine, their scent mixing with the morning air to create an atmosphere of herbal calm. The floorboards creak in predictable places, having settled into their foundations over decades, and each creak is a word in the house's vocabulary, a language of home that needs no translation. Near the window, a small vase holds a single stem from last week, its petals now dried and curled, waiting to be replaced but still offering its faded beauty to the room. The light that enters through the window is soft and golden, the kind of light that suggests the sun is still low on the horizon, still climbing its way into full morning brightness. It touches everything with a gentle hand, illuminating dust motes that float lazily through the air, turning them into tiny stars that drift and spin without purpose or hurry. This light falls across the table, across the waiting mugs, across the surface of the stove where a kettle sits ready, and it transforms these ordinary objects into something more, something worthy of notice and appreciation. There is a quietness here that feels intentional, as though the house itself is holding its breath, waiting for the day to truly begin. In this moment, in this space between sleep and waking, between night and day, there is only the gentle presence of a home at rest. The air moves slowly, the light spreads gradually, the shadows shift with patient grace. And in this stillness, there is an invitation, unspoken but clear, to set aside the rushing thoughts, to release the tension held in shoulders and jaw, to simply be present in this peaceful beginning. The world outside may hold its complexities and demands, but here in this kitchen, touched by dawn's first light, there is only the soft promise of a new day, arriving without haste, asking nothing but to be noticed, to be breathed in, to be allowed to unfold in its own tender time. Let yourself settle into this quiet morning, into this space where nothing urgent presses and nothing harsh intrudes. Here, in this story, there are no sudden storms, no unexpected troubles, only the gentle unfolding of a single day in the lives of two people who know each other as deeply as they know themselves. This is a place of softness, of understanding, of the small and tender moments that make up a life lived with care and attention. As you listen, allow your own day to fall away. Let your worries drift like those dust motes in the morning light, aimless and without weight, until they disappear entirely from your awareness. If you find comfort in these quiet tales, if you would like to return to this peaceful space whenever you need refuge from the noise of the world, a gentle tap on the subscribe button will ensure that our collection of bedtime stories is always here, waiting for you. And when a story touches you, when it brings you even a moment of peace, a small light helps these whispered narratives find others who might need them too. But for now, simply let yourself be here, in this kitchen, in this moment, as the day begins to wake. The first sounds of morning activity begin to emerge from the rooms beyond the kitchen. The soft pad of bare feet on wooden stairs, The quiet creak of a door opening, the subtle shift of weight on old floorboards. Two people are beginning their day, moving through the rituals that structure their mornings. But today there is something different in the quality of their movements, something more careful, more deliberate, as though each gesture requires thought rather than flowing from habit. The air in the house, so peaceful just moments ago, now holds something else, something unnamed but present, like a note played slightly off-key in an otherwise harmonious melody. A drawer opens in the kitchen, silverware shifting with a soft metallic whisper as a hand reaches for spoons. The cabinet where the bread is kept closes with a gentle click. Water runs from the faucet into the kettle, a sound like distant rain, and then stops. These are the sounds of breakfast being prepared, sounds that should be comforting in their familiarity, but today they seem isolated, each action complete unto itself, rather than part of a flowing conversation of movement and presence. The toast goes into the toaster with a soft mechanical descent. The butter dish is retrieved from the refrigerator. A knife is selected, each action careful, each sound distinct. And so the story begins, not with a grand entrance or a dramatic proclamation, but with this, the simple and profound moment of two people preparing to share a morning meal, carrying between them something unspoken, something that weighs no more than a breath, but feels in this moment as present as the table itself. Let us stay with them, quietly observing as they navigate this tender space, as they find their way back to each other through the small and sacred rituals of an ordinary day. Amelia moves into the kitchen with the kind of quietness that suggests deep thought, her mind clearly occupied with something beyond the simple task of making breakfast. She is a woman in her early 40s, with hands that show the evidence of her work, small calluses on her fingers from years of handling thread and fiber, nails kept short and practical. Her hair, a deep brown shot through with strands of silver, is pulled back in a loose arrangement that suggests it was gathered without the aid of a mirror, purely functional, out of the way. She wears loose linen pants in a faded sage green and a cotton shirt the color of undyed wool, soft from many washings, comfortable clothes that allow freedom of movement, that do not demand attention or care. She reaches for the butter dish, her movements precise but somehow lacking their usual fluid grace. Normally, Amelia moves through her kitchen like a dancer through familiar choreography, each gesture leading naturally to the next, her body knowing without thinking where each item lives, how to navigate the space with efficiency and ease. But this morning, there is a slight hesitation before each action, a fractional pause that suggests her mind is not fully present with her hands. She opens the butter dish and sets it on the table. She takes a knife from the drawer, the one with the wooden handle worn smooth from use. She places it beside the butter with careful attention, making sure it is perfectly parallel to the edge of the table, a detail she would normally never notice or care about. The toast pops up from the toaster with a soft mechanical sound, and Amelia retrieves it, placing each slice on a small ceramic plate, cream-colored with a thin blue line around the rim. She brings the plates to the table, setting one at each place, and then returns to the counter where the teapot waits. Her hands move through the familiar ritual of preparing tea, opening the tin where the loose leaves are kept, the blend they both favor, a mixture of chamomile and mint with just a touch of dried apple. She measures the leaves with a small wooden spoon, tapping the excess back into the tin with 2 quick motions, and places them in the pot. The kettle has begun to whisper, not yet reaching its full cry, but close enough that steam is beginning to emerge from its spout in thin, wavering ribbons. As she waits for the water to reach the right temperature, Amelia's gaze drifts to the window, to the lace curtains moving almost imperceptibly in the morning breeze, to the view beyond of the garden, still half hidden in the soft shadows of early light. Her expression is difficult to read, something between pensiveness and sadness, though sadness seems too strong a word for what shows in the slight downward curve of her mouth, the small crease between her eyebrows. It is more like a wistfulness, a sense of something missing or misplaced, something that should be here but is not, or is here but feels distant, out of reach, on the other side of an invisible barrier. The kettle reaches its crescendo, and she lifts it from the stove, pouring the hot water over the leaves in the teapot with steady attention, watching as the water darkens, as the herbs begin to release their essence into the liquid, transforming it from clear to golden, from plain to purposeful. She replaces the lid on the pot and sets it on the table between the 2 places, between the 2 plates of waiting toast. Then she sits, not in her usual chair but in the one opposite, and immediately realizes her mistake, rises, and moves to her proper seat, the one that faces the window. This small confusion seems to unsettle her further, and she places her hands flat on the table, palms down as though steadying herself, as though the solid wood beneath her fingers can anchor her in this moment where everything feels slightly adrift. Leo enters the kitchen from the back door, having already been outside, his boots left on the porch where they always wait, mud-free and ready for the day's work. He is a man who looks entirely comfortable in his own skin, not tall but solidly built, with the kind of strength that comes from years of physical work done with care rather than haste. His hands are clean but bear the permanent stains of soil, faint brown shadows under the nails and in the creases of his knuckles that no amount of scrubbing fully removes. He wears canvas pants in a worn olive shade and a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms tanned and freckled from hours spent in the sun. His hair is graying at the temples, still dark on top, cut short enough to be practical but not so short as to lack character. He sees Amelia sitting at the table, and something in his expression shifts, a momentary softening followed by a tightening, as though he has remembered something he had briefly forgotten. He moves to the counter, to the place where his mug waits, and stands there for a moment, his hand resting on the handle, not yet picking it up. The silence between them is not the comfortable quiet of two people who have no need to fill every moment with words, but rather the careful silence of those who are choosing not to speak, who are carrying something that has not yet found its way into language. It is a silence with texture, with weight, and it fills the kitchen like a third presence, uninvited but impossible to ignore. He brings his mug to the table and sits in his chair, the one that faces away from the window, and reaches for the teapot. His movements are gentle as he pours, watching the amber liquid fill his cup, steam rising in delicate spirals. He pours for Amelia as well, though she has not asked, filling her mug to the level he knows she prefers, just 3/4 full, leaving room for her to hold it comfortably without risk of spilling. This small gesture, this act of care performed without thought or announcement, seems to hang in the air between them, acknowledged and yet somehow unable to bridge the distance that the morning has created. They begin to eat, or rather to go through the motions of eating, each taking a piece of toast, each applying butter with slow strokes, each bringing the toast to their lips and taking small bites that seem to require more effort than usual. The taste is there, the warmth, the simple satisfaction of bread and butter and hot tea, but it is as though they are experiencing it from a distance, as though there is a thin veil between them and their senses. Leo glances at Amelia between bites, his eyes seeking hers, but she is looking down at her plate, her attention focused on the task of breaking her toast into smaller pieces, creating a small pile of golden fragments that she does not eat. What has passed between them is not named here, not given shape through narration, because it is not the kind of thing that requires naming. It is the ordinary friction of two lives lived in close proximity, the inevitable moment when two separate hearts, no matter how aligned, find themselves briefly out of rhythm with each other. It might have been words spoken too sharply before the morning coffee had worked its magic. It might have been a forgotten promise or a misunderstood intention. It might have been nothing more than two people waking on opposite sides of their private worries, carrying into the shared space of morning the weight of individual concerns that had nothing to do with each other, but created distance nonetheless. Whatever its origin, it sits between them now, small but significant, a pebble in the shoe of their day. When the breakfast is finished, or rather when they have both made a sufficient show of eating, Leo rises first, taking his plate and mug to the sink. Amelia follows, bringing her own dishes, and they stand side by side for a moment, both reaching for the faucet, hands nearly touching, but Leo pulls back, gestures for her to go first. She washes her dishes in silence, the water running over her hands, and sets them in the drying rack. He does the same, their movements carefully choreographed to avoid unnecessary contact, and then, without discussion, they part ways. Amelia moves toward the stairs that lead to her studio on the second floor, a space carved from what was once a large bedroom, converted over years into her workspace, her sanctuary. Leo moves toward the back door, toward the garden that sprawls behind the house, his domain, his place of peace and purpose. The stairs creak under Amelia's feet in a pattern she knows by heart, the third step from the bottom, the seventh from the top, each sound a familiar announcement of movement through the house. She climbs slowly, one hand trailing along the smooth banister, worn to satin softness by generations of hands before hers. The house is old, built in a time when craftsmanship meant something beyond efficiency, when corners were properly squared and wood was joined with care. The walls of the stairwell are painted a warm cream color, adorned with small framed pieces, some her own work from years past, some prints of botanical illustrations, ferns and flowers rendered in meticulous detail. The light from the window at the top of the stairs creates a soft glow, illuminating dust motes that swirl in her wake, tiny galaxies spinning in the still air. Her studio occupies the northeast corner of the second floor, blessed with windows on two walls that fill the space with gentle, indirect light throughout the morning hours. The room smells of fiber and oil, of wool and linen and cotton in their various states, of linseed oil used to treat the wood of her loom, of beeswax from the candles she sometimes lights in the evening when she works late. The loom dominates the space, a large floor loom of dark walnut, its frame sturdy and substantial, built to last generations, a tool and an instrument and a piece of functional sculpture all at once. The warp threads are already mounted, running from the back beam to the front in precise parallel lines, cream-colored cotton that will become the foundation for her next piece. Shelves line the walls, organized by color and fiber type, a rainbow of possibility waiting to be transformed. There are baskets of wool in shades of gray, from palest dove to deep charcoal, each skein twisted and ready. There are silks in jewel tones, emerald and sapphire and ruby, their fibers catching the light and throwing it back with a soft sheen. There are cottons in earth tones, umber and ochre and sienna, colors drawn from clay and rust and autumn leaves. There are linens in shades of natural flax, from pale cream to warm biscuit, fibers that carry within them the memory of summer fields and blue skies. Each basket, each shelf, each carefully wound skein represents hours of work ahead, potential projects, imagined textiles, dreams waiting to be woven into reality. Amelia moves to the loom and sits on the bench, adjusting its height with a small turn of the screw mechanism beneath, finding the position that will allow her to work for hours without strain. She selected her weft thread yesterday, a soft wool in a shade she thinks of as dusty rose, though it is more complex than that simple description suggests, holding within it hints of mauve and taupe, a color that seems to shift depending on the light, on what surrounds it. She had been excited about this choice yesterday, had held the skein up to the window, and admired how the afternoon sun revealed depths and subtleties in the color. But today, as she picks up the shuttle and begins to wind the thread around it, the color seems dull, flat, less interesting than she remembered. Then she tells herself this is just the different quality of morning light, that the color will reveal itself again as the day progresses, but the enthusiasm she felt yesterday remains elusive, just out of reach. She begins to weave, her feet working the treadles in the pattern she has internalized, her hands passing the shuttle through the shed, the space created between the raised and lowered warp threads. The shuttle slides smoothly from right hand to left, then left to right, a rhythm as old as civilization itself, a motion that has been repeated billions of times by weavers across thousands of years. There is something deeply meditative about weaving, about the repetition, about the slow accumulation of thread into cloth, about the way each pass of the shuttle adds almost nothing, just a single line of weft, but over time, over hundreds and thousands of passes, creates something substantial, something real and useful and beautiful. Normally this rhythm soothes her, empties her mind of concerns, allows her to exist purely in the physical present of motion and creation. But today the rhythm feels mechanical rather than meditative, her mind refusing to settle into the work, instead circling back again and again to the breakfast table, to the careful silence, to the way Leo's eyes had sought hers and she had looked away, unable or unwilling to meet his gaze. She replays the morning in her memory, trying to understand exactly when the distance had opened between them, trying to remember if there had been a specific moment, a specific word or gesture, or if it had been more gradual, a slow cooling like tea left too long on the table. Her hands continue their work, passing the shuttle back and forth, but her attention is divided, her heart not fully present in the task. The colors of her threads surround her, vibrant and rich, but today they seem muted, as though someone has turned down the saturation, drained away some essential vitality. The dusty rose looks almost gray in places. The cream of the warp seems less warm than it should be. more cold and clinical. She pauses in her weaving, resting her hands on the breastbeam of the loom, and looks at what she has created so far. Perhaps 30 rows of weft, barely enough to see the beginning of the pattern emerging. It is competent work, technically sound, each thread in its proper place, the tension even and consistent. But it lacks something, some spark or spirit that usually infuses her textiles, that makes them more than just thread and technique. She tells herself to continue, that the spark will return, that she is simply having an off morning, that every artist has days when the work feels more like labor than love. Outside her window, the morning continues to unfold. Birds move through the branches of the oak trees, their songs filtering through the glass, muted but still audible, small bursts of melody that rise and fall. A breeze stirs the leaves, creating a soft, rushing sound, like distant water. The light shifts gradually, the sun climbing higher, changing the angle at which it enters the room, moving the shadows across the floor in slow progression. Time passes, measured in passes of the shuttle, in the growing length of woven cloth, in the movement of light across the walls. Amelia works steadily, mechanically, her body performing the familiar motions while her mind remains elsewhere, caught in the small, tender trap of unresolved tension, of words not spoken, of connection temporarily lost. Meanwhile, below and beyond in the garden that stretches behind the house, Leo moves through his own morning ritual, his own attempt to find peace in familiar work. The garden is extensive, not in the sense of vast acreage, but in the sense of being fully utilized, every corner and edge cultivated, every space given purpose and attention. There are vegetable beds built from reclaimed cedar, their soil dark and rich and teeming with life, planted in careful succession to provide fresh produce from early spring through late fall. There are herb spirals constructed from stone, creating multiple microclimates in a small space, allowing Mediterranean herbs that prefer dry conditions to thrive at the top, while moisture-loving varieties flourish at the base. There are fruit trees espaliered against the southern fence, their branches trained into flat, elegant patterns that maximize sun exposure and fruit production. There are perennial borders filled with flowers chosen for their long blooming periods and their attractiveness to pollinators, creating ribbons of color that flow through the seasons. Leo walks the paths between the beds, his eyes scanning for problems, for signs of pest damage or disease, for weeds that need pulling, for plants that need water or staking or harvesting. This morning inspection is one of his favorite parts of the day, a quiet time when he can assess and plan, when he can notice the small changes that occur overnight, a flower opening, a fruit ripening, a seedling emerging from the soil. Normally this walk fills him with satisfaction and purpose, with the deep contentment that comes from tending living things, from participating in the cycles of growth and decay, from working in partnership with soil and sun and rain to create abundance and beauty. But today, even here in his beloved garden, even surrounded by the green, growing things that usually anchor him so completely in the present moment, he finds his mind returning to the kitchen, to the breakfast table, to the way Amelia had seemed so distant, so unreachable, though she sat only an arm's length away. He kneels beside a bed of lettuce, pulling a few small weeds from between the plants, his fingers gentle to avoid disturbing the shallow roots. The soil is cool and slightly damp from yesterday's watering, the perfect consistency, and normally he would take deep satisfaction in this, in the evidence that he has timed the irrigation correctly, that the plants are receiving what they need. But today, this small success feels hollow, unable to penetrate the layer of unease that has settled over him like morning fog. He moves to the herb garden, to the raised spiral where rosemary and thyme and oregano grow in fragrant profusion. He runs his hand over the rosemary, releasing its sharp, clean scent into the air, and brings his fingers to his nose, inhaling deeply. The scent is strong and clarifying, meant to clear the mind, to improve focus and memory. But today it only serves to sharpen his awareness of his own distracted state, his inability to be fully present with the work. He pinches back some of the new growth, shaping the plant, encouraging it to bush out rather than grow leggy, his fingers performing the task from long practice, while his thoughts spiral elsewhere. He wonders if he should have said something at breakfast, should have broken the silence with an apology or an explanation, or simply an acknowledgement that something felt wrong between them. But the moment had passed, or rather, had never quite arrived, the right words never forming, never making their way from thought to voice. And now the morning has progressed, They have separated into their respective spaces, and the opportunity feels lost. The distance increased rather than diminished. He tells himself that there will be time later, that they will have lunch together, that the day is young and there are many hours ahead in which to repair what feels broken. But knowing this intellectually does not ease the discomfort in his chest, the small, persistent ache that sits just below his sternum, a physical manifestation of emotional discord. The garden continues to demand his attention, and he gives it, moving from task to task with quiet diligence. He harvests lettuce for their evening salad, choosing outer leaves from multiple plants rather than taking too much from anyone, ensuring that the plants continue to produce. He checks the tomato plants, massive sprawling things staked and tied, their branches heavy with fruit in various stages of ripeness, from hard green globes to soft red orbs ready for picking. He finds several that are ready, twists them gently from the vine, and places them in a basket he has brought for this purpose. The tomatoes are warm from the sun, their skins taut and smooth, and he knows that they will taste of summer, of long days and warm nights, when sliced and dressed with nothing more than salt and oil. He spends time with the flowers, dead-heading spent blooms, encouraging the plants to put their energy into new growth rather than seed production. There are cosmos in shades of pink and white, their delicate petals like tissue paper, dancing on thin stems in the slightest breeze. There are zinnias in bold, saturated colors, orange and magenta and yellow, their blooms large and cheerful and impossibly vibrant. There are dahlias, complex architectural flowers, their petals arranged in precise geometric patterns, some varieties with blooms as large as dinner plates. He moves among them with secateurs in hand, snipping and tidying, creating a small pile of faded flowers that will go to the compost, returning their nutrients to the soil that will feed future generations of plants. The physical work should ground him, should pull him fully into his body, into the present moment, into the immediate and tangible reality of plant and soil and sun. And to some extent it does, his muscles engaging, his breath deepening with exertion, sweat beginning to form on his brow and between his shoulder blades. But underneath the physical engagement runs a current of emotional preoccupation, a stream of thought and feeling that refuses to be diverted, that continues to flow toward Amelia, toward the morning's silence, toward the question of how two people who love each other can suddenly feel like strangers sharing a table. The morning continues its slow progression toward midday, the sun climbing higher, the light growing brighter and warmer, chasing shadows into smaller and smaller refugees. In her studio, Amelia has woven perhaps 2 hours' worth of cloth, the fabric growing on the loom in incremental additions, row after row of dusty rose weft interlacing with cream warp. She has fallen into the physical rhythm of the work, her body taking over where her mind cannot, her hands and feet moving in practiced coordination. But even as she works, even as the cloth grows, she is aware of a dissatisfaction, a feeling that something is not quite right, though she cannot name what it is. The pattern is correct. The tension is even. The color, while not as vibrant as she had hoped, is still pleasing enough. And yet, she pauses, letting her hands rest in her lap, and looks at the growing textile with a critical eye. And then she sees it, or rather feels it, the thing that has been bothering her without her conscious awareness. The color, this dusty rose she has chosen, is beautiful in its own right, but it is not the right choice for this piece, not the right choice for this moment, not the right choice for what her heart actually wants to create. She realizes with sudden clarity that she has been weaving what she thought she should weave, what would be practical or marketable or impressive, rather than what she actually wants to make, what would give her joy. And with this realization comes another, deeper one, that this is what she has been doing all morning, perhaps for longer than this morning, going through motions, fulfilling expectations, internal and external, rather than listening to her own genuine desires. And perhaps she thinks this is part of what happened at breakfast, part of the distance that opened between her and Leo. Perhaps she has been so focused on doing what she thinks she should do, on being who she thinks she should be, that she has lost touch with the simpler, truer self who simply wants to connect, to be present, to share space without agenda or performance. She reaches into her basket of threads and pulls out a skein of deep amber, warm and golden and full of light, the color of honey held up to the sun, the color of autumn leaves at their peak, the color she realizes with a small catch in her throat, of Leo's favorite sweater, the one he wears on cool evenings when they sit on the back porch watching the day fade. She had purchased this fiber months ago, drawn to it immediately but uncertain what she would do with it, and it has sat in her basket waiting for the right project. But now, holding it in her hands, feeling its weight and warmth, she knows this is what she should have been weaving all along, this color that carries within it associations of comfort and home and love. She does not remove what she has already woven, the rows and rows of dusty rows. That work is not wasted. It is simply preparation, foundation, the journey to understanding what she actually needed to create. But she sets the rose-colored shuttle aside and picks up an empty one, beginning to wind the amber thread around it, watching as the color accumulates, as the shuttle fills with golden warmth. And as she does this simple task, as she prepares to introduce this new color into her weaving, she feels something shift in her chest, a small release, like a knot beginning to loosen. The color seems to glow in her hands, to radiate a kind of gentle energy, and she realizes that this is what had been missing from her morning, from her work, from her state of mind. Not technical skill or effort or discipline, but genuine feeling, authentic connection to what she was doing and why. In the garden, Leo has worked his way to the back corner, to the section where the perennials grow in layered abundance, and here, tucked against the fence where it receives dappled shade from the neighbor's maple tree, is the camellia bush he planted 5 years ago, a gift to Amelia for their anniversary. Camellias are her favorite flower, and this variety was chosen specifically for its coloring, white petals with the faintest blush of pink at their centers, like sunrise touching snow. The bush has thrived in this location, growing tall and full, its glossy dark green leaves providing year-round structure, and in late winter and early spring, it produces blooms of such delicate perfection that they seem almost unreal, too beautiful to be the product of soil and water and sun. He is not expecting it to be blooming now in the middle of autumn, but as he approaches to check its health, to make sure it has adequate moisture, he sees among the leaves a single flower, perfect and impossible, blooming out of season. He stops, genuinely surprised, and kneels to examine it more closely. The bloom is fully open, its petals arranged in concentric circles around the cluster of golden stamens at its center, each petal smooth and unblemished, white as fresh cream, with just the slightest flush of pink, exactly as he remembers from the spring blooms. It should not be here, should not exist in this season, and yet here it is, a small miracle, a gift offered without explanation. He reaches out to touch it, his soil-stained fingers gentle, and the petals are cool and silken, impossibly soft, and he is suddenly, acutely aware of beauty, of grace, of the way the world sometimes offers exactly what is needed, exactly when it is needed, without being asked, without expectation of thanks or recognition. This flower, blooming out of its time, feels significant in a way that transcends horticulture or botany, feels like a message or a reminder or a small beacon of hope in a morning that has felt grey and disconnected. He thinks of Amelia, of how her face lights up when she sees camellias, of how she once told him that they reminded her of snow and sunrise at the same time, of how she always stops to admire them when they bloom in spring, sometimes bringing a blossom inside to float in a shallow bowl of water on the kitchen table. He thinks of the distance at breakfast, of the silence that had felt so heavy, so impenetrable, and then he looks at this flower, at its perfect, fragile beauty, and he understands something that he had not quite articulated before. The distance was not created by anything large or dramatic, not by anger or betrayal or any fundamental incompatibility. It was created by small things, by tiredness perhaps, by individual preoccupations, by the simple fact that they are two separate people who sometimes wake up on different emotional shores and need to find their way back to each other across the water. And this flower, this impossible autumn camellia, feels like a bridge, or at least the beginning of one. He does not have the words to explain what he felt this morning, does not have the language to articulate the small sadness of disconnection, but perhaps he does not need words. Perhaps this flower, this thing of beauty that he can offer to Amelia, can say what his voice cannot, can communicate across the silence what his sentences would fumble. He reaches into his pocket for his secateurs, then hesitates, unsure if he should cut it, if taking this flower would be wrong, would be diminishing the garden's gift. But then he remembers that flowers exist to be admired, that their beauty is meant to be shared, not hoarded, and that this bloom, blooming out of season as it is, will likely not last long regardless of whether it remains on the bush or is brought inside. He cuts the stem carefully, leaving several inches attached, making the cut at an angle to maximize the surface area for water uptake. The flower sits in his palm, light and perfect, and looking at it he feels the tightness in his chest ease slightly, feels the beginning of hope, that the day does not have to continue in the grey valley of disconnection, that there is still time, still possibility, still the chance to close the distance and find their way back to comfortable togetherness. He stands holding the flower carefully and begins to make his way back toward the house, leaving his tools where they lie, suddenly urgent with the need to bridge this gap, to offer this small, perfect thing, this silent apology and declaration and invitation all at once. The afternoon light has begun its slow transformation, the quality of brightness shifting from the clear, sharp illumination of midday toward something softer, something golden and warm, that speaks of the day's gradual descent toward evening. In her studio, Amelia has continued weaving, and the amber thread has begun to appear in her textile, first as thin lines, experimental passes of the shuttle, and then with more confidence, broader bands of color that glow against the cream warp like honey drizzled on fresh bread. The color transforms the piece entirely, brings it to life in a way the dusty rose could not, and as she works, she feels her mood lifting, feels herself returning to her body, to the present moment, to the simple satisfaction of making something beautiful with her hands. She has been working for hours now, lost in the rhythm, in the slow accumulation of cloth, and only the growing discomfort in her shoulders, the stiffness in her lower back, reminds her that time has passed, that her body has limits even when her mind wants to continue. She completes the row she is working on, advances the warp to bring fresh threads into working position, and then stands, stretching her arms above her head, feeling the vertebrae in her spine realign with small, satisfying pops. She walks to the window and looks out over the garden, and there, among the neat beds and winding paths, she sees Leo, sees him moving toward the house with something in his hand, though from this distance she cannot tell what it is. The sight of him creates a complex feeling in her chest, a mixture of longing and regret and tenderness. She misses him, she realizes, even though he has been here all along, just a floor and a garden's width away. She misses the ease of their connection, the comfortable togetherness that usually defines their days. She misses the small touches, the passing of hands on each other's shoulders or backs, the casual physical contact that says, "I see you, I am here with you," without needing words. She misses the sound of his voice, his quiet observations about the garden, his gentle humor, his way of noticing small details and finding them worthy of comment and appreciation. She decides, standing there at the window with the afternoon light warming her face, that she will go downstairs, that she will find him and say something, anything, to break through the silence that has held them separate all morning. She does not know exactly what she will say, has no prepared speech or explanation, but she trusts that words will come, that once she is in his presence, once she allows herself to be vulnerable and honest, the right expressions will emerge. She takes a breath, releases it slowly, and turns from the window, moving toward the door of her studio with purpose and intention. But as she reaches the top of the stairs, she hears the back door open and close, hears Leo's footsteps in the kitchen below, and she pauses, suddenly uncertain. Should she go down now, or should she wait, give him time to settle, to wash his hands, to transition from garden work to indoor presence? She stands in the hallway, hand on the banister, caught in a moment of indecision, and in that pause she hears water running in the kitchen sink, hears the clink of ceramic, hears Leo moving through the space with familiar efficiency. She decides to give him a few minutes, to let him complete whatever task has brought him inside, and she moves back into her studio, tidying her workspace, putting away the dusty rose thread she has decided to set aside, organizing the shuttles and tools, creating order as a way of managing her nervous energy. Downstairs, Leo stands at the kitchen counter, the camellia stem in a small glass of water, while he considers his next move. He has washed his hands, scrubbing away the soil and plant residue, has wiped the sweat from his face with a clean towel, has taken a moment to calm his breath and collect his thoughts. The flower sits before him, perfect and serene, and he realizes that he wants to present it properly, wants to create a moment that honors both the flower and what it represents. He looks around the kitchen, searching for the right vessel, and his eyes land on a small ceramic cup, cream-colored, that Amelia made years ago in a pottery class. A simple, elegant piece that she uses for tea when she wants to drink something slowly, mindfully. He fills the cup with fresh water and carefully transfers the camellia stem from the glass, adjusting the flower until it sits at the perfect angle, the bloom facing upward, visible and beautiful. He carries the cup to the table, to Amelia's usual place, and sets it beside where her mug would sit. And then he steps back, regarding the arrangement with a critical eye. It looks right, he thinks. Looks like a statement of care, of attention, of the desire to bring beauty into her day. But he realizes that the table itself looks bare, unwelcoming, and he decides to do more, to create not just a gesture but an environment, a setting that invites presence and connection. He moves through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, his earlier uncertainty replaced by focused intention. He retrieves their teapot from the shelf and prepares fresh tea, a different blend this time, rooibos with vanilla and almond, a naturally sweet infusion that Amelia loves in the afternoon. While the tea steeps, he selects 2 clean mugs from the cabinet, not just any mugs but their favorites, the ones they reach for when they are feeling in need of comfort, the ones that fit their hands perfectly, that have become extensions of their daily rituals. He places these at their usual spots on the table, the flower sitting between them, a focal point, a silent centerpiece. He considers adding food, perhaps bread and cheese, fruit from the garden, but decides against it, intuiting that this moment should be simple, should be about the tea and the flower and the 2 of them, without the distraction of eating, without the ritual of a meal. He pours the tea when it is ready, filling both mugs, watching the reddish-brown liquid swirl and settle, steam rising in gentle wisps. The vanilla scent fills the kitchen, sweet and comforting, and he breathes it in deeply, finding in it a kind of courage, a reminder that small acts of care matter, that the gesture of preparing tea for someone you love is never wasted, never too small to be significant. He sits at his place, the flower to his right, Amelia's mug waiting across from him, and he allows himself to simply be present in this moment, in this space he has prepared. The kitchen is quiet, filled only with the ambient sounds of the house, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant song of birds outside. The light coming through the window has that particular quality of late afternoon, golden and slanting, creating long shadows and warm pools of illumination. He wraps his hands around his mug, feeling its warmth seep into his palms, and he waits, patient and hopeful, for Amelia to appear. Upstairs, Amelia has finished tidying her studio and stands once more at the top of the stairs, her heart beating a little faster than normal, her breath slightly shallow with anticipation and nervousness. She has decided she will go down. She will not wait any longer. She will bridge this distance because it is unbearable, because a day spent separate from Leo, even when they are in the same house, feels like a day wasted, like hours that could have been filled with warmth and connection, instead allowed to pass in isolation. She descends the stairs slowly, her hand trailing along the banister, her feet finding the familiar creaking boards, and as she reaches the bottom, as she turns toward the kitchen, she smells it. Vanilla and almond, the scent of rooibos tea, her favorite afternoon comfort. She enters the kitchen and sees the table, sees the 2 mugs waiting, sees the flower in its ceramic cup, white petals with their blush of pink catching the golden light, and she stops, her breath catching in her throat, her eyes suddenly warm with the pressure of tears that want to form but do not quite fall. She looks at Leo, who is watching her with an expression of tentative hope, and she sees in his face the same longing she has been carrying all day, the same desire to reconnect, the same regret over the morning's distance. And in this moment, in this simple scene of prepared tea and a single perfect flower, she understands that they have both been feeling the same things, both been missing each other, both been wanting to reach across the gap, but uncertain how. She moves to the table, not speaking yet, not trusting her voice, and sits in her chair, her usual place, and she reaches out to touch the camellia, her fingers barely grazing the soft petals. The flower is real, it is here, it is impossibly beautiful, and it is Leo's way of saying what he perhaps cannot put into words, his way of offering an apology or a peace offering or simply an expression of love. She looks at him across the table, across the small distance that now feels bridgeable, navigable, and she speaks, her voice soft but clear. The first words between them since breakfast that feel genuine, unguarded, real. "Thank you," she says, and the words are simple, but they carry weight. They carry all the emotion of the day, all the missing and the longing and the regret, compressed into 2 small syllables. Thank you for the tea, thank you for the flour, thank you for being patient, thank you for trying, thank you for still being here, still caring, still wanting to close the distance. Leo nods, his own throat tight, and he reaches across the table, his hand palm up, an invitation, and after only the briefest hesitation, Amelia places her hand in his, their fingers interlacing, their skin warm and familiar, and in this contact, in this simple touch, something releases, something eases, like a door that has been closed all day, finally opening to let in light and air. They sit like this for a long moment, hands joined across the table, the flour between them, the tea steaming gently in their mugs, and they do not need to speak, do not need to explain or justify or analyze what happened or why. It is enough to be here together, connected by touch and intention, acknowledging that sometimes there is distance, and sometimes that distance needs to be crossed deliberately, with care and attention and small acts of beauty. The tension that has been present all day, that has made the house feel slightly wrong, slightly off balance, begins to dissipate, begins to dissolve like sugar in hot water, sweetening the atmosphere, transforming it into something more comfortable, more like home. Eventually Leo speaks, his voice quiet, almost tentative. "I saw this blooming," he says, gesturing with his free hand toward the camellia, "and I thought of you, thought you would want to see it, that it might make you smile." And Amelia does smile then, a real smile that reaches her eyes, that softens her whole face, and she squeezes his hand gently. "It does make me smile," she says. "It makes me more than smile, it makes me remember why I love autumn, why I love this garden, why I love this house." She pauses, her thumb moving in small circles on the back of his hand. "Why I love you," she adds, the words emerging naturally without effort or performance. Just simple truth spoken into the quiet afternoon kitchen. Leo's expression softens further, his own eyes bright, and he lifts her hand to his lips, presses a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so tender, so full of care, that Amelia feels her eyes prick with tears again, though these are different tears, tears of relief and gratitude and the overwhelming feeling of being seen, being known, being loved, even in her imperfection, even in her moments of withdrawal and distance. They release hands slowly, reluctantly, both aware that they need to drink their tea before it cools, but the release feels different now, feels temporary rather than final, a practical pause rather than a disconnection. They lift their mugs in near synchrony, bringing the warm ceramic to their lips, and they drink. The tea sweet and smooth and comforting, the vanilla and almond flavors blending perfectly with the naturally nutty taste of rooibos. The warmth spreads through their bodies, relaxing muscles that have been tight all day, easing tension held in jaws and shoulders and bellies. They drink slowly, savoring not just the tea but the moment, the restored sense of togetherness, the relief of being on the same side of the invisible barrier again, rather than on opposite shores. Amelia tells Leo about her morning at the loom, about the dusty rose thread that would not cooperate, about the moment she realized she was weaving what she thought she should, rather than what she wanted to, about the amber thread that changed everything. Leo listens with full attention, his eyes on her face, nodding at appropriate moments, understanding without needing elaborate explanation that she is talking about more than just thread choices, that she is talking about authenticity, about listening to genuine desires rather than imagined expectations. He tells her about his morning in the garden, about the tasks completed, but the satisfaction that remained elusive, about the way his thoughts kept returning to the breakfast table, to the feeling of disconnection that had colored his entire morning, about finding the camellia, and understanding that sometimes love requires action, requires gesture, requires the deliberate choice to bridge distance. Thus they talk quietly, their voices soft and unhurried, and gradually the conversation moves beyond the morning, beyond the explanation and processing, and becomes simply talk, the kind of easy exchange that characterizes their normal days, observations and thoughts and small stories shared without agenda or purpose, beyond the sharing itself. Amelia tells him about a pattern she wants to try, a complex twill variation she saw in a textile book. Leo tells her about the tomatoes, about how prolific the plants are this year, about his plan to make sauce this weekend if she would like to help. She says yes, She would love to help. She has been wanting to spend more time in the kitchen with him, and he smiles, pleased, already imagining the process, the chopping and stirring and tasting, the kitchen filled with the scent of simmering tomatoes and basil and garlic. The light in the kitchen continues to shift, the sun moving lower in the sky, the angle becoming more acute, the shadows growing longer and softer. The golden quality intensifies. Everything touched by the afternoon glow seems to radiate warmth, and the kitchen, this simple room where they have shared thousands of meals and conversations, feels like a sanctuary, a place of safety and comfort and belonging. The camellia sits between them, its white petals luminous in the slanting light. A small miracle, a reminder that beauty appears when least expected, that nature offers gifts without being asked, that sometimes what is needed appears exactly when it is needed. They finish their tea slowly, neither wanting to rush this moment, this restored connection, this feeling of being fully present with each other. When the mugs are empty, Leo rises and brings them to the sink, and Amelia follows, bringing the ceramic cup with its precious flour. They wash the dishes together, standing side by side, their movements comfortable and coordinated, and there is something deeply satisfying about this simple task performed together, about the warm water and the soap bubbles, and the quiet companionship of shared labor. Leo washes, Amelia dries, and they place the clean dishes in the cabinet, and then Leo takes the cup with the camellia and places it on the windowsill where it can catch the last of the afternoon light, where its beauty can be appreciated, where it can serve as a reminder of this day, of the distance crossed, of the small and perfect gestures that mend what has been temporarily broken. Evening arrives gently, the way it always does in this season, with a gradual dimming of light, a cooling of air, a sense of the world settling into quietude. The sky outside the kitchen window shifts through its palette of colors, from gold to peach to rose to lavender, each shade melting into the next with seamless grace. Amelia and Leo have moved to the living room, to the worn sofa that faces the fireplace. Though no fire burns tonight, the weather still too mild to require it. They sit close together, not quite touching but near enough to feel each other's warmth, each other's presence, and they simply rest here, in this comfortable silence that is so different from the morning's careful quiet, so full of ease and acceptance and mutual contentment. The house around them settles into its evening sounds, the small creaks and sighs of wood adjusting to temperature changes, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing on the street outside, sounds so familiar they barely register as sound at all, becoming instead part of the ambient texture of home. The light continues to fade, the room growing dimmer, shadows pooling in corners and under furniture, and neither of them moves to turn on a lamp, both content to let the darkness come naturally, to let the day transition into night at its own pace. Leo shifts slightly, his shoulder coming to rest against Amelia's, and she leans into the contact, her head finding the hollow between his shoulder and chest that seems designed exactly for this purpose. His arm comes around her shoulders, pulling her closer, and she sighs, a sound of pure release, pure contentment, and she allows her weight to settle fully against him, trusting him to hold her, to support her, to be the solid presence against which she can relax completely. His hand rests on her arm, his thumb moving in small, absent circles, a gesture of affection and reassurance, and they breathe together, their breath gradually synchronizing, falling into the same rhythm, the same pace, two people becoming temporarily one in the quiet communion of physical closeness. The day has been long, has felt longer than a single rotation of the sun should feel, packed with emotion and work and distance and reconnection. They are tired, both of them, the kind of tired that comes not just from physical exertion, but from emotional processing, from moving through difficulty toward resolution. It is a good tired, a tired that speaks of effort rewarded, of challenges met and overcome, of relationship maintained through conscious choice and deliberate action. They have walked through the valley of disconnection and emerged on the other side, and now, sitting together in the gathering darkness, they can rest, can allow themselves to simply be without doing, without striving, without performing. Outside, the first stars begin to appear, faint points of light in the deepening blue of the sky. The evening chorus of birds has quieted, replaced by the occasional chirp of crickets, the first notes of the night's symphony. The air coming through the open window is cool and fresh, carrying the scent of earth and grass and the faint perfume of the night blooming jasmine that grows along the fence. Inside, Amelia and Leo remain still, held in each other's arms, their breathing slow and deep, their bodies relaxed, their minds quiet. The day is ending the way all days should end, in peace and comfort, and the deep security of being loved and loving in return. Time passes unmeasured, minutes or perhaps longer, and neither of them speaks, neither wanting to break the spell of this perfect quietude. The room has grown quite dark now, only the faintest light remaining in the sky, and in this darkness they feel safe, cocooned, held by the house and by each other. Amelia's eyes are closed, her breathing so regular that Leo wonders if she has fallen asleep, but then she stirs slightly, her hand finding his and holding it, and he knows she is still awake, still present, still here with him in this gentle ending of the day. Eventually, when the last light has faded from the sky, when the room is dark except for the faint glow from a street lamp outside, Leo speaks, his voice barely above a whisper, soft enough not to disturb the peace, but clear enough to be heard. "Should we go to bed?" he asks, though it is less a question than a gentle suggestion, an acknowledgement that the day has been full and they have earned their rest. Amelia nods against his chest, but neither of them moves immediately, both reluctant to leave this moment, this perfect stillness, this feeling of complete and utter contentment. But finally, with slow and reluctant movements, they rise from the sofa, helping each other up, their hands clasped together. They move through the dark house, not bothering with lights, knowing the way by heart, their feet finding the path from living room to hallway to stairs. They climb together, still hand in hand, the stairs creaking their familiar song, and they reach the bedroom, the space they share, the place where each day ends and each new day begins. They prepare for sleep with quiet efficiency, the rituals of washing and changing performed side by side, and then they slip under the covers, the sheets cool and smooth and welcoming. They turn toward each other in the darkness, their bodies finding their familiar sleeping arrangement, Amelia's head on Leo's shoulder, his arm around her back, her hand resting on his chest, his hand covering hers. They fit together perfectly, the way they always have, the way they always will. Two separate people who have chosen to make a life together, who have learned to navigate the inevitable moments of distance and disconnection, who know that love is not just a feeling but an action, a choice made daily, hourly, in small gestures and large ones, in flowers picked from the garden and tea prepared with care, and hands held across tables and bodies held in the darkness of a shared bed. Sleep comes quickly, pulling them down into its gentle depths, and their last conscious thoughts are of gratitude, of relief, of the deep satisfaction of a day that began with distance but ended with closeness, of a morning that felt broken but an evening that feels whole. The house settles around them, protective and familiar, and outside the window the stars wheel slowly across the sky. The earth turns, the night deepens, and two people sleep peacefully, held by each other and by the love they have built, slowly and carefully over years of mornings and afternoons and evenings, over thousands of small moments that have woven together into a life, a partnership, a home. Our story comes to rest here, in this place of peace and resolution, in this quiet ending that is also a beginning. For tomorrow the sun will rise again, and Amelia and Leo will wake together and begin a new day, carrying forward the lessons of this one, the reminder that distance is temporary, that silence can be transformed from uncomfortable to comfortable, that small gestures matter, that love is expressed not just in grand declarations, but in the everyday choice to reach across the space between two hearts and close the gap. I hope this story has brought you comfort, has perhaps reminded you of the resilience of connection, of the possibility of repair, of the way that difficult moments can be navigated with patience and care, and the willingness to be vulnerable, to offer what you can, to accept what is offered in return. May you find in your own life the courage to bridge distances, to offer flowers both literal and metaphorical, to prepare tea for those you love, to sit in silence that is companionable rather than cold, to rest in the warmth of relationship, of belonging, of being known and loved. If you are still listening, if you have traveled with me through this day of distance and reconnection, I am grateful for your presence, for your attention, for your willingness to spend these quiet moments here in this story. If these words have touched you, if this tale has brought you even a moment of peace or recognition or comfort, a gentle light tells our quiet stories that they are valued, that they are finding the hearts that need them. And if you would like to return to this peaceful place, if you would like to have more stories waiting for you when the day has been long and sleep feels far away, subscribing to our channel ensures that new tales will always be here, ready to welcome you, ready to offer you rest. Thank you for allowing me to read to you tonight. Thank you for sharing this quiet space, this gentle story, this reminder that love is both fragile and resilient, that distance can be crossed, that silence can be broken, that morning's coldness can become evening's warmth. May your own rest be peaceful and deep. May your dreams be gentle. May you wake tomorrow to connection and warmth and the small perfect gestures that say, "Without words, I am here, I see you, I love you." Sleep well. Good night.